Hey guys, it's Evan, and it's mid-October 2024, and I just went through and I fed the majority of the animals in this collection. They're starting to eat them right now, and I'm making this video today about safely feeding your boa constrictors, especially large ones, managing feeding mishaps, and then I'm going to do a demonstration at the end of feeding 4 different prey items: a mouse, a rat, a poultry, and a couple of rabbits, so that you get some ideas of how it happens in real life. But the first thing I'll tell you guys is 2 things. One, I've hesitated about making this video. It's one of the obvious first choice videos to make, and I've waited till 4 or 5 years into my channel to make this video, just because I think that it tends to attract people that aren't super serious about the animals themselves and are more just interested in the lurid aspects of reptile keeping. But for me personally, feeding my snakes is not super exciting. Feeding snakes is about as exciting as changing water bowls or scooping poop. It's a fact of me having chosen to keep wild animals in captivity whose natural diet is whole prey, and we need to manage that as closely as we can to the wild, and that would be creating by offering primarily whole prey feeders. If you don't feed your snake whole prey feeders, the majority of the time they're going to suffer malnutrition because they don't get all of the nutrition that's in a gut-loaded animal. So that's what I would tell you guys about this, is that I take no joy in it. It's a fact of life. I've been a little hesitant to put this out there, but I also think I can make it educational. And when you're feeding these guys, there's things that you need to know about feeding, both for your safety and their safety, and it's just something that I wanted to put out a good feeding video. I didn't just want one of me going through and hammering food into snake. I could show you a video of 50 boa constrictors hammering prey items easily. I do that every couple times a month in here, and it only takes 3 or 4 minutes. So that's not what this video is about. So if that's what you want, go search somebody else. What I'm going to talk about first, I'm going to talk about equipment, then I'm going to talk about snake safety, I'm going to talk about your safety in general presentation techniques. Then I'm going to talk about some mishaps that I've had while feeding my animals and how I've dealt with them in ways that was smart, in ways that weren't smart, in ways that maybe you should react if you have a feeding mishap, which will happen to everyone over time. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go through and feed some animals just to show you it in action. So I'm going to flip the camera around over here and talk about some other subjects. So the first one is, let's talk about equipment. So equipment, these are 2 of the 3 things that you will need when you're feeding. And the first thing that you're going to need is some sort of adequate tong. And this really depends on the size prey you're feeding and your personal preference, but these are all tongs that I personally use. And so this is a pair of tweezer tongs like this. This is really good. I use them for small mice, small snakes. They're long and thin, which actually is a little better for reluctant feeding baby snakes because you stay far away from them, don't startle them so as much. But the thing I like about them are those things. The thing I don't like about these is the same issue with hemostats, is they are sharp, pointed this way. And so that's something that you have to be concerned about. And in general, the way to present a feeder to an animal using something with a sharp tip is not to, this is not the way. That is not the way, because they come and they bite that, they stab their mouth, they get mouth rot, whatever the hell. The way to present it, and I'll show this in the video, is to clamp it up higher. And when you present it, clamp it so that it'll be at kind of head height for the snake. And when you present it, put the points straight down into the ground, and that way they come and take it off like that. It's much safer. So any sort of hemostats, things like that, the curved hemostats are really good for those because it kind of puts the point even farther away. But that's a point I make about anything pointed. It's a safety concern about mouth injury. This is probably my backbone pair of tongs. These are called sponge clamps or forceps. That's what they can find. This is a Redline Science brand. I got this from Matt and Kathleen Hanlon Ball Pythons, I think is their name, but they vend shows in the Northeast. They're really great, and they vend these. They're inexpensive, but you could also probably get them somewhere else that sells Redline, or if you want to go to Surgical Supply, these are called sponge clamps or forceps. So that's what I would tell you. These are still oldies but goodies. I still use them a lot. They're just barbecue tongs, classic hot dog tongs. I like things that have this type of scissor more than things that have like a forceps because you get more force on them. The only thing I don't like about these is when you get into feeding rabbits and things, they aren't quite strong enough. I've had snakes break them and I've had them break. Another issue with them is this little gap right here can catch the foot of a feeder. I've had that happen before, and that will be one thing I'll talk about in the mishaps. And the last thing I'll tell you is when you're feeding really large animals, I don't like things that have these captive scissor style handles, because one of the most common mishaps you'll get is that they'll get the tongue wrapped up in it, and you can see it's really bad. Maybe it's just because I've had thumb surgery that I'm worried about this, but I prefer, for feeding larger items, snake tongues. The snake tongues are really the only thing, feeding is really the only thing that I would ever need snake tongues for. I don't keep venomous, and even if you do keep venomous, they shouldn't be used for clamps that much. But this is a pair of snake tongues, and I like them because it has this style grip, so if they get the tongs, bam, free. My hand's not gonna get caught in there. It's got this nice big safe round tip. And it has quite a bit of clamping force. So this is a pair of snake tongues. You can get them on Amazon. You don't need to buy the super expensive ones, but I like these. So that's a piece of equipment I'd say is use a pair of tongs that are big enough to give you confidence and understand that you also need to be safe with them in terms of mouth injuries. And the other thing that you need to have in your hands when you're feeding is a snake hook of some sort, because there's two rules of thumb in terms of feeding. First, don't open the cage with your hand, because one of the best ways to get bit is opening the cage. And number two, if you have your feeder tongs in your right hand, you got to have a hook in the left hand, because if any of your snakes get crazy or squirrely or start coming out of the cage or whatnot, especially when you get into 6, 7, 8 foot boas, they can come out of the cage 2, 3, 4 feet. You want something in your hands so that you don't have to block with your hands. There you go. It's as simple as that. So that's snake equipment. The only last thing, and I didn't pull it out yet. Let me go find it for you. That I always have. I have these stashed on top of every stack of cage that has large animals in it, and it's a squirt bottle with a little bit of diluted Listerine in it. So if you do end up taking a food wrap, you can just slip this into their mouth and go boop, and they will let go immediately. They hate that Listerine. So that's just something else I would tell you. But those are the pieces of equipment that you need, okay? Now, I'm just gonna walk around and show you some of these guys starting to consume. When we're talking about feeder safety, that's paramount. I just fed that little Guyana a bird, feeding this one a bird, feeding this one, no, that one ate a bird, that one's eating a rat, a little Bolivian boa. But when we're talking about safety, it's both your safety and your snake's safety. And so, how do I say this? When we start getting into these things, let me back and catch myself. Snake safety, feed frozen thawed. Most importantly, feed frozen thawed. Secondly, consider your substrate. So you either want it to be small enough that it can pass through or big enough that they can't eat it. So that basically means small mulch type substrates and things like that. If you're worried about them consuming consuming items or the substrate, what you can do is either feed them on top of a piece of plastic lid like that, or you can put a big sheet of cardboard or something down. But I would just tell you, as long as you're using a generally safe substrate, the one that I'm always worried about is paper towels. They're just the right consistency, they're soft and easy to bunch up and swallow. So just be careful about that, make sure that they're not eating it. And the last thing I will tell you is that you need to have a good, secure, firm, proper grip on your feeder, kind of like I demonstrated. For your safety, here's what I'll tell you to do. Before you open that cage, know where the head of that snake is and be careful about it. The second thing I will tell you to do is open the door with something that's not your hand. The third thing I'll tell you to do is have a snake hook in your hand at all times. The fourth thing I'll do is tell you to present the item confidently and assertively. Just walk in and go, boom, feed the animal. When you start dangling it around and pussyfooting around, that's when the snakes get all crazy. It kind of gets them a little like overly stimulated, and that's when you get a little bit psycho. Feeding responses, and that's not what you like. So that's where we go. And now I'm going to talk about some feeding mishaps. Oops, I just lost my tripod. Sorry, guys. It's hard to film this because I'm moving it around. But some feeding mishaps that have happened to me. And the first feeding mishap I already kind of alluded to is that you got bit. You took a food wrap. You opened the cage door when there's food scent in the room and you took a food wrap. It's happened to me. It's embarrassing when it happens with snakes that are over like 3 or 4 feet. I really don't like it, and it's no fun. But I will tell you, the first thing to do is stay calm. you're going to be okay. There's different things you can get them to do you can do to get them to release that aren't going to injure you or the snake. The first thing I would tell you to do is use that Listerine trick. Another thing that you might try is running them under the cold tap water. If you don't have any of those things, what you should try to do is secure the head, and so that they can't get any more of a grip on you, and hopefully over time they'll let go. There's some more little obscure tricks and things like a glottal block that you can actually close their glottis and they can't breathe and things like that. But I will tell you that if you have a spritz bottle full of Listerine or rubbing alcohol or vodka or mint mouthwash, vinegar, they don't like any of those things. They will let go immediately. Most snakes will let go if you run them underwater. Like my children's pythons, they're super, super bitey. I get food wrapped by them all the time doing stupid things like changing their water bowls. And I'm just like, come on guys, and you're gonna get the hose again, but that's what happens. And it doesn't hurt them, they let go and then life goes on. So that's what I'll tell you about getting bit. Moving on from there, I'm gonna talk about a couple of feeding mishaps that involve the snake. The first one I already mentioned is they get your tongs. They wrap up your tongs and hopefully they don't hurt your fingers in the process. But the only thing to do with that is to just leave the tongs in and wait. That's one of the reasons why I have more than a couple of tongs, all right? Another thing that they might do when you are feeding them is they get crazy. They get a little overly aroused. And that means that they start getting a little psycho, and it's just not a really good scenario to feed them. This one just onboarded a rabbit. This one is onboarding a rabbit right now. And if your snake gets crazy, here's what I would tell you to do. Close the door, walk away, and come back in 5 minutes for two reasons. One, it gives you a chance to reset. It gives the animal a time to reset. Those are both things that just are really good for the emotional levels of both of you. And the other thing I will tell you is you don't want to reinforce that psycho behavior, meaning any living creature, humans down to amoebas, will repeat a behavior that's positively reinforced. So if they're so food stimulated, so highly food aroused, like these guys are know they're getting fed, look how food aroused they are. These are high risk animals to feed, and I'll demonstrate them. But if your animal is getting so highly food aroused and it's going psycho and it's jawing the glass or it's coming out at you or lunging, and then bam, you're gonna reinforce that with the feeder item. Oh look, he's resetting his jaws. You reinforce that with the feeder item, it's just not a good thing. So when your animal gets crazy, just close the door up, go feed some other animals, go walk away, and then come back in 5 or 10 minutes. And so that's not, just what I will tell you. Another thing that they might do in that process is bite themselves. Boas, I think colubrids are more notorious for trying to eat themselves. Boas, I've never seen them try to do that, but they will bite themselves and kind of get stuck occasionally. And the only thing to do there is to wait and watch. And the last thing is that sometimes they get things, they might snag something. So you do have to be careful. Like I mentioned, like one time the foot of the feeder got caught in those tongs, and I ended up having to cut the foot of that rat off so that it wouldn't start to eat the tongs. But in general, any mishap involving your animals, the best thing to do is wait and watch. Most of those things will resolve themselves on their own. It's an auto cure method. They just will. You should be ready to intervene if you're worried about something, but just wait and watch. I'll tell you kind of a dumb story I did about how I got bit pretty good last year. Is I was feeding one of my Brazilian short tails, and she went to strike the prey, and I was just kind of a little like, I just jumped a little bit, and she missed, and she struck the mulch, and the mulch had a pretty good stick in it, and she got it caught in her mouth, like almost like a toothpick in her mouth like this, so she couldn't close it, and she's like, And so in all my infinite wisdom, I decided what I should do is use the back end of my snake hook to pin her head, grab her behind the head, and extricate it. So what did I do? I used the back end of my snake hook, I pinned her head, no problem. And as I was about ready to reach in and grab her behind the head, she spat the stick out, whipped around, and food wrapped my hand. So that's how you know I'm not ready for venomous extractions. But I'll just tell you in general, if your snake has a bad feeding incident or a mishap or anything like that, wait and watch. They get your tongs, leave the tongs in there, wait and watch. They'll probably let go of the tongs as they're swallowing the feeder, and you can go grab them up. If they start to inhale the tongs, you can do something about it. It's much safer in those moments just to wait and watch. Nothing's gonna happen quickly. It takes them 10, 15 minutes to onboard the feeder. So wait and watch, you'll see it happening, and that's just the safest way to handle any of those situations. So from here, I'm gonna go on and do some feeding demonstrations. These might not actually be filmed super well because the last part about being feeding safely is being focused. I'll just tell you that that's an important issue. Yeah, I don't know any other way to say that. Be focused, be careful. But, let's see. Here we go. I'm going to feed the snake, right? I'm going to feed a rat down low. And I'm going to feed a chicken on the second at the top. So here we go. Some of these cages, you can open them from the middle and keep your hands far away. Some of them you can't, it depends on how easily they slide. Rat, grip by the hips, no tails, none of this. None of that. Grip from the hips. Right in front of the animal. The food wraps, it's closed, it's done. That's all it takes. Again, open something off your hand. That's Dot, she's a sweetheart. When I feed poultry, I crisscross their legs like that and bite them and pinch them like that. So anything larger than a Gale chick, I clip the beaks and the feet. I don't think it's super necessary, but here's the other thing, is I've had a couple of people give anecdotes about snakes that they think died after feeding them a pretty big poultry. Sometimes I'll feed adult roosters and things to those big snakes, and they have pretty serious spurs and things. And even if they aren't going to kill your snake, I think they probably could rip your snake up pretty good going in and out. And that's just not something that I would recommend doing. So, in general, if they get bigger than a week old or a day old or a week old or something like that, I'll start to clip them. In the freezer, they will tear up Ziploc bags. So just, imagine that going down the gut, especially if you're thinking about true red-tailed boas and things, from stomach. You don't need something a little bit of mincemeat every time you feed a poultry. So here we go. I'm going to feed some small children's pythons. And here's a great example of when, I think this is the one that all right, here's a great example of one that you need to open with a hook, or you will get it every time. So here we go. Pointed feeder. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to present. Boom. Almost got my tongs, pulled them out. But do you see how I kept the tongs vertical like this so it wasn't likely to hit the flight? So that's just a way to feed a small mouse. There we go. And now let's go in and feed some big animals. Migrate, migrate, migrate. Tools, migrate, migrate, migrate. Look at that. Look at my wife. Isn't she the best? She's a yard work too. All right, let me go back and grab the feeders. And I will just tell you guys, you should see these animals and know that right now that's a very good chance of me getting bit if I was not careful here. So just take this seriously. It's not something to be doing lighthearted. It's not something to be doing. I try not to walk in front of these kids and move too much or they will start to slam the glass. But just come in and feed them. Don't bring your friends in here. Don't do it after a couple of beers. None of that more. So here we go. Again, I can start to pull it here. Open it here. This snake will hammer me if I put my hand I'm just gonna open it no farther than I need to. I'm still using that glass shield. Prey item by the hips. Bring it over here. See why that snake hook is good? You can lift them up. These big snakes like to come out of the cage. It's a little wacky. I don't love it, but whatever. Also, if your snake was getting super squirrely feeding, or if you had something that was consistently psycho when you try to feed it, there's no issue in floor feeding them. So you could, like if these were a little bit psycho, I would just put that right on top of that tub and it would be a non-issue. So I know where his head is, her head is, and it's right where I don't want it to be, so I'm gonna have to be quick about feeding and just kind of slip it to her because I don't want her to come out and get the opportunity for her to get a little overly aroused. So here we go. Again, this is what I mean by trick. Boom, boom. There you go. Snake comes out onto the ground. I don't know if you can see that. That's not really a mishap, or I guess you could consider a mishap. It's not ideal. Usually what you can do. Get him back in with the tongue. Let me get this in the way that I don't dump my water bowl and make myself mad. So just be careful, guys. They are pretty committed. If I didn't want to avoid videotaping myself getting a nasty food wrap, I wouldn't use my tongs. But you can do that with them once they're committed. They're not going to do anything. But there you go. That's a little less than perfect feed right there. So you got a real life example of it. But anyways, I hope you guys understand that my motivation here is to give you guys some knowledge and to make you guys a little safer and to show you how it goes in my collection. And that you don't get your rocks off on watching me feed snakes and stuff, because that's not where I'm at either. But I hope this is of value to you guys. I've had some interest from it. If I start, I don't know. I hope that this doesn't go viral. I hope that this is here for hobbyists to use as a resource. And here we go. These just onboarded rabbits. Tree boa just got, I mean, you can't really see her, but tree boa just got a small rat. All sorts of stuff. So there you go. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.